Now, none of us actually believe that there's an actual disease that does push-ups in a parking lot, but we catch the vibe and it's repeated enough, and we know when the way that propaganda works and mind control and thought reform is you repeat it over and over and over again, and it goes into the mind. A way to brainwash somebody is to give them continued suggestions. It's just a suggestion. Yeah, it's called mind control, your little suggestions. Hello, welcome to the Sobriety Bestie podcast. My name is Kirsten, and I am so excited for today's episode. Is alcohol addiction, alcohol use disorder, or alcoholism, is it a fatal progressive disease, or is it a reversible habit? Scandalous. I know this is heresy if you are steeped in the AA ideology. I know even thinking this way can feel dangerous, bring up guilt, or feel uncomfortable, or maybe you're ready for it. This is literally one of the most exciting things I have found in a long time. This video is a part of our AA alternative series. So we're doing an entire playlist on alternative ways to achieve sobriety or recovery from alcohol use disorder other than Alcoholics Anonymous. You've probably heard this before in some variation, depending upon what countries or country you have gone to AA meetings in. Your disease is in the parking lot doing push-ups. Have you heard that? What did they say in your country? I know somebody in the UK said something about the monkey was out the window or something. Yeah, so basically there is an analogy that spread through Alcoholics Anonymous about the idea of this fatal progressive disease personified as some demonic exercising creature that is essentially in the parking lot doing push-ups. And what I took that to mean was that it's getting stronger even when you're sober. People would literally say that in the meetings I was in. Your disease wants you dead sober. It's getting worse sober. So that if you don't drink for 5 years, if you put on, what does the book say, the big book? Something about after 5 years of not drinking, the person put on their carpet slippers or whatever and drank, and it was nuts, and they were dead within a few years or something. So that's another one of the death threats. There's so many death threats in the book. And I don't take alcohol addiction lightly. I understand that addiction is deadly, but the way that it's described in AA's big book is just not reality. Some of it points to reality, but I'm into the modern science vibes around here, if you know what I mean. So yeah. So is there a disease in the parking lot doing push-ups? No. But is that actually pointing to something real? Yes. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Really, what we're going to be talking about is alcohol addiction a life sentence? Because not only is it so-called fatal, but also so-called progressive and also a disease. So there's a lot of AA ideology to unpack there and to look at what might really be going on. So the AA mythology is, yes, you have a fatal progressive disease. And in AA, addiction is framed as spiritual. We have a spiritual malady, and it's a moral disorder issue where clearly you need confession, restitution, recruiting, and all the other religious stuff, because it was taken originally from a cult religion, right? It was taken, Bill took the steps, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous were rejigged, as we know, from the Oxford group Cult Religion. If this is new to you, I'll put that up here. Did a whole playlist on that. That's called Yes, AA is a Cult. So if you want to check that out, where the 12 steps came from, I'll put that up here. So in AA, they say, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. I definitely don't believe this anymore. And side note, obviously, if you're new here, the entire vibe is critical thinking. So it doesn't matter what I'm thinking here. These videos are to spark conversations in you and in the comments and just in the greater world, I hope. Bring more truth to addiction and recovery. I think we've been lied to for a long time. So one of the lies in AA, in my view, again, what do you think? Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. To me, that's complete mythology, and I believe that this video can help serve as a scientific myth buster to that actual myth. So AA considers alcoholism, which is not an actual medical diagnosis, it's alcohol use disorder, but AA considers it a lifelong incurable disease. When we look at actual alcohol use disorder, it's not considered a lifetime disease. It's considered something that you can be recovered from. Different people have different opinions, different medical providers or institutions. There's not one fully agreed on group that says this is the amount of time that you recover. It makes sense because everybody's different. Like they couldn't say this is how long it's going to take for you to recover from a broken leg. Legs break in different ways, and there's different healing paths, and there's different levels of compliance to the recovery protocol. So there is no one way for anything. That's all cult stuff. When AA says we are the way, like anyone who says we are the way, it's just kind of giving cult. It doesn't mean you're a cult, but it's giving cult, if you know what I mean. So AA says that they are the only solution, and that this solution is a surrender to God. Obviously, they say they're not a religion, but at the same time, the entire program is about turning your will and your life over to God. The steps are designed to get you access to a higher power that's going to enable you to stop drinking. So the entire program is you want to get sober, and they're like, you got to get God. It's a bait and switch where now all of a sudden it's about God. So they're equating what I'm going to say as the habit of drinking. Ooh, that's heretical. I know, I would have been so pissed off. In fact, I was. I'll tell you that story another time. I'm so pissed off if anybody suggested that alcohol addiction, something as serious as alcohol addiction, is a habit. But that's actually how I see it now. Again, what do you think? Let us know in the comments. So the only solution to this so-called fatal progressive disease in AA ideology is surrender, abstinence. Abstinence is a big one. We know AA is into purity culture. They're not totally wrong in this. I just see that there's a better path now. And God, obviously. So you must identify as an alcoholic forever. This is part of AA ideology. If you relapse, you go back to step one again and again and again. There is an entire shame ritual around this, where you have to raise your hand as a newcomer for the next 30 days. You got to get a chip. And then quite often what I've seen is older members with more time will actually be condescending to the person who had a drink, as if it completely wiped away everything that they already knew and everything they already experienced about sobriety. And of course, if you leave the program, if you walk out of the church basement, careful in the parking lot if you were going to leave AA, because there are diseases out there doing push-ups. So it's basically this idea that your disease of alcoholism that's fatal and progressive wants to kill you. And if you leave, it certainly will. You're going to end up in a jail, an institution, or death. And that's the AA ideology. And I think all of that now is mythology. So what this actually creates in us is it creates a chronic fear. That was my biggest fear leaving AA. Before, I was worried about being shunned, because that sucked too. But it was about, am I going to die? Now, none of us actually believe that there's an actual disease that does push-ups in a parking lot, but we catch the vibe, and it's repeated enough, and we know when the way that propaganda works and mind control and thought reform is you repeat it over and over and over again, and it goes into the mind. A way to brainwash somebody is to give them continued suggestions. It's just a suggestion. Yeah, it's called mind control, your little suggestions. I digress. Okay, so it creates chronic fear, identity fusion, because now you're identifying as an alcoholic that this is something inherent now to who you are. You used to be a cucumber, and now you're a pickle. You can never go back. Did you hear that cucumber pickle thing? If you're not in America, or if it was different in your meetings, let us know in the comments what it was. But basically, once a cucumber turns into a pickle, it can never become a cucumber again. So that's the once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But if you had another like metaphor where in your meetings, let us know in the comments. There's shame loops, of course, and there's no off-ramp ever. You have this permanent thing that wants you dead. So the only way to stay alive, essentially, is to stay active inside Alcoholics Anonymous. Do the steps, be of service, grow along spiritual lines, connect with a higher power, always say yes to AA, all of the things. And so there's no other way to combat this fatal progressive monster that does push-ups in the parking lot other than doing AA. That's AA ideology. So AAs will say, yeah, we realize we know only little, or we do recommend outside help. And sometimes that's true, but quite often the culture is the problem is alcoholism and the solution is the 12 steps, period. That's it. That's at least how I was conditioned. That was the brainwashing that I got. Now, I know I got sober in 2009, and in 2025, things that were a little bit more evolved, a lot more evolved actually as a society. Where does this fatal progressive disease idea even come from? Because it's not a fact, it's an idea. It's rooted in 1930s ideology. It is a well-known fact that Bill Wilson got sober in the Oxford group Cult Religion. What is a little bit more hidden is that Bill actually spent the first 2.5 years of his sobriety, and Dr. Bob spent the first 4 years of his sobriety inside the Oxford group, doing Oxford group meetings, Oxford group literature, like the Bible. And so that's how they actually got sober. So the actual program was never designed specifically for recovery. It was designed as a religion. It was designed to get you towards God. That's actually what Bill and Bob did when they got sober. They did a religion. And so it wasn't about science. It wasn't about peer-reviewed information. It was also the 1930s. So there wasn't what we know now about the brain and addiction and all the things that have to do with mental health, neurodivergence, anything that might be going on with us is so much more advanced now in 2025 than it was in 1934 when Bill got sober, or 1938 when they wrote the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the disease that does push-ups in the parking lot or does burpees in the bushes or does handstands in the, I don't know, wherever, it's like a fear tactic. It's not reality, obviously. It's not a scientific fact. But where did this fear tactic come from? Because I always like to think about it as like, yeah, okay, it's baloney, but where did the baloney come from? Because even when things are a lie or not true, there's usually a kernel of truth in them, or they come from somewhere. So I'm always interested, as a former cult religion AAer, a current critical thinker and self-truster, I want to understand, like, but why? So why was this a thing? Turns out our pal, Dr. Silkworth, the doctor at the town's hospital where Bill went to rehab and eventually got sober, and the one who is the doctor's opinion in Alcoholics Anonymous's sacred text, the big book. So Dr. Silkworth told Bill, hey, bro, nobody's getting sober, because nobody was getting sober the first 6 months that Bill was proselytizing for the Oxford group, trying to get people sober. He felt like if he could get people sober, he would stay sober, right? And so he was proselytizing for the Oxford group Cult Religion. Nobody was getting sober. He's like, you got to have a white light spiritual experience like I did on the belladonna treatment. And nobody wanted God. What do we really want when we're struggling with alcohol, when we're having alcohol problems? We want our problems with alcohol to go away. We don't want to get sober, most of us. We just want the consequences to stop. And so we certainly, a lot of us, most of us, I certainly didn't want religion, didn't want God. I just wanted my problems to not be so intense. I wanted to be able to drink safely, have fun with alcohol again. And so Dr. Silkworth took Bill aside and said, listen, pal, nobody wants God, and it's a hard sell. That's why they're not getting sober, probably. But what if you told them they had a fatal disease? Tell them about the disease factor. Tell them it's going to kill them. If they are afraid of dying and believe they have a disease, they're going to be willing to listen to your God pitch, your cult religion sales pitch. Now, those weren't the exact words he used. I'm obviously being a little cheeky, but Dr. Silkworth told him, give this angle a whirl in your marketing plan as you're recruiting people. Now, I do think Bill was genuinely trying to help people get sober. I think at the beginning he was, and he did believe, probably very self-centered motivated, that that was going to help him. So he did have, in a way, good intentions there. But when you start to take opinions and say that they're ultimate truths, that's when we start to get even more shady. So there's a lot of shady stuff in the beginning too. When I really look at it, it was a con job from the start, but let's continue. What does modern science say about this fatal progressive disease, or what might be going on? Because there are people who leave sobriety, whether it's AA or whatever, they were abstinent, and then they go and they drink and they have a relapse, and it's actually more intense, or it is more consequences, or it feels for some people like it was worse than when they stopped, or the same, or a soon amount of time after they start drinking again. It is exactly where they left off, or it is worse. So what might be actually going on there? Because that's not all wrong. It's just not a disease doing push-ups. So if you abstain from drinking and you are further along in your alcohol use disorder, like it's mild, moderate to severe, so especially if you are moderate to severe, but probably for mild as well, it can feel worse. This is not because anything's doing push-ups or burpees or handstands or cartwheels or anything else that diseases don't do. Not that alcoholism is even a thing, nor is it a disease. It's called alcohol use disorder. But there is something here that's actually really important. So I know I'm joking, but this is like so fascinating to me. It is called alcohol deprivation effect, ADE, alcohol deprivation effect. This was discovered by Dr. David Sinclair. So rats who are deprived of alcohol, who are bred specifically, so there's these rats that were bred specifically or genetically already attuned to it to really like alcohol. And so they did a lot of research with rats that don't like alcohol and rats that do like alcohol, but there was specific genetics with it too, which is really cool. I'm talking so fast. It's the morning and I'm drinking a coffee, so bear with me. But literally this might be like one of my favorite videos that we've ever done. So when you deprive these alky rats of alcohol, then you reintroduce it into the cage, they drink more than ever, at least initially. So this fatal progressive push-up phenomenon, it's a phenomenon that occurs sometimes, does show up in lab rats who are bred with genes to be alky rats. So the cravings increase after abstinence, especially without something that's called extinction. More on this in a minute. So the brain gets more sensitized, not less, with abstinence. I am kind of convinced at this point that abstinence is not the best path to sobriety, which sounds bananas. That's why I'm so excited for this series that we're doing right here. So abstinence doesn't fix the craving loop, it strengthens it. The more you suppress it without rewiring, the stronger it can snap back. What AA calls progression is often just deprivation without extinction. Extinction would be reversing the alcohol addiction neurologically. The brain isn't plotting your relapse, it's just responding to withheld reward. Because the alcohol releases chemicals in our brain that rewards us. It's our reward pathways. So relapse is not proof that you are powerless, especially a stronger relapse or episode after some sobriety or abstinence. It's proof that the craving is conditioned. Okay, so yes, relapse after abstinence often is more intense, but it's a neurological rebound, not a demonic disease that likes fitness in parking lots. So this all, as you may probably be already well aware, let me know if you're already doing the Sinclair Method or if you heard about it, let me know in the comments. So the Sinclair Method, and remember, Sinclair is the doctor who discovered the alcohol deprivation effect with his alky mice. The Sinclair Method uses science to fix what fear, like the AA fear, never could. So in the Sinclair Method, as you drink, you're taking a pill, and that helps your brain actually decouple or unlearn the addiction so that you're no longer getting all the endorphins and you're no longer getting the reward from drinking. There is still pleasure to the drinking, but it's not the big high that used to be there because those receptors are being blocked by the medication. And so what happens is that we unlearn the habit. I'm going to unpack the science in another video. This is more like to kick us off on this journey, which I'm super thrilled about. Let me know what you think about all this stuff in the comments. So this is called pharmacological extinction. So in the Sinclair Method, they call it extinction. It's where your brain literally unlearns so that that disease getting stronger, it gets weak. And it's not a disease, it's neural pathways. It's the wiring in your brain. The best thing about this is that there's no withdrawal. There is no fear. There is no shame. There is no needing to turn your will and your life over to anything outside of yourself. You can maintain your dignity, your self-esteem, your autonomy, all of the things. But because the receptors are blocked in your brain, you naturally over time are less interested in drinking, and your drinking naturally declines and may even decline into sobriety. So let's talk about why you may have never heard about this, how we can actually, that disease push-up strengthening thing in the parking lot, we can actually remove its muscles, make it weak, make it go away. And so the reason why this has been a mystery or hidden for most of us is because AA dominates the recovery culture. And this is because AA went hard, in my opinion. Let me know why you think this is. But I think this is because AA went very hard into propaganda, particularly in the 1940s. So the big book came out in 1939. And then Marty Mann, AA number 5, came along, and she was very smart. She was very well connected. She was from a lot of money. She knew people in like publications high up, and she had a lot of access, and she was very passionate and very driven and made it her life mission to get AA well known. So she got AA ideology, including the disease model, fatal progressive baloney, into American culture, into medical institutions, into Hollywood, into media, into American minds. We as Americans, and also as just international, any country, think of AA as a great path to sobriety because of the propaganda. That's my opinion. Also, rehabs profit from framing addiction as a chronic illness and you're going to relapse. There's also a nocebo effect, where if you're always told something's going to happen, it's more likely to happen, even if it's a bad thing. So the placebo is when we get that positive result from taking like a sugar pill. We get the medicinal effects because our minds are strong. Nocebo is when we get the negative effects of something. So if we're always told it's going to be worse, then we might just say F it, and it will be worse because we were conditioned that way. But there's also the neurological underwirings in addiction that these rat studies show, which is super cool and has been proven again and again and again in lots, like over 100 or maybe even hundreds of studies with the Sinclair Method. So doctors aren't trained in these modalities. American culture, it's not widely known yet about this. And people in AA can't question the narrative because it feels dangerous. It felt dangerous to me to even do this research, if I'm being totally honest, which might sound silly. But the more that I dug in, and that's probably a whole other like episode, I was like, wow, this is cool. And then I could feel like AA ideology or AA dogma kind of being healed in my head as I allowed myself to think critically about this, because it did feel dangerous to look into this for me. But that's not me. That's AA mind control that I am deprogramming from as I create this content. So we're like deconstructing together. That's how I see it. Okay, so you're not broken. There is no disease doing push-ups. There never was. There never will be. It's BS. We know that diseases don't do push-ups. In my opinion, we are not diseased. We never were. It was conditioning. We conditioned our minds, just like Pavlov and his dogs. We were never diseased. That was a cruel control tactic to lock us into a system, creating a made-up fatal disease, and then selling the only solution to it is a great way to, I don't know, sell your program. Bill was a salesman, remember? I think it's a good sales pitch. You're going to die without me. And a lot of us believed it. I know that I did. We know better now. And I think we deserve better. 90 years later, it's ridiculous that this is still all going on when there is an easier, softer way. And it's actually, I think it's this way. So what do you think? Have you heard of the Sinclair Method? What do you think about the fatal progressive disease? Were you told about a push-up doing parking lot thing? I also want to let you know I have a lot of free and also paid ways to take a next step with me if you're vibing it. So I'll put all my links below to lots of different free gifts, or if you want to do a paid online course, that's all below. And I can't wait for the next video, which is all about what is the Sinclair Method. I wish I knew about this when I got sober in 2009. It was a thing then. I didn't know about it. And so that's why I want to shout about it now, because I think that the more information we have, the more we think critically, the better decisions that we can make for ourselves. And I wish I had gone this route to get sober and not through a cult religion, because there's no deconstructing process if you go through the Sinclair Method. Anyways, enough out of me. What do you think? I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. All right, I'll see you in the next video.